So welcome to our fifth webinar in this series, where we've been looking through the aims and principles of Woodcraft Folk and how we can put these into practice whilst we're running our groups. Each age group will approach the aims and principles slightly differently, and together we will explore how we can engage everyone in the aims and principles of our organisation. This webinar focuses on working as one world, and we will look at how to develop an understanding of the need to protect our environment and the use of the world's resources, and how we can deliver this aim age appropriately to our different groups. So, if my PowerPoint will work, what this webinar will cover, we'll look at what is one world and why is it important. We'll look at some things to remember before we begin delivering activities to our groups. And then we'll talk about how we can put this into practice whilst running our groups, and you'll have a chance to share with us some activities that you've done on this aim and principle. Then we'll have a look at the outcomes matrix, and then I'll go through a few examples of activities for different groups and for a camp. So then we'll go through a few things to consider, and along the way there'll be time for discussion and sharing, and also some questions. So what is one world and why is it important? What we mean by one world, the Woodcraft folk say that they will encourage an understanding of the need to protect our environment and the use of the world's resources. With this aim, we will seek to encourage our members to protect our urban and rural environment in the interests of all. So it's important to remember, as I say in all the webinars, that all our groups are different and so may approach the activities and topic of one world slightly differently. But as leaders, we can decide which activities would work for our own groups, as some will and some may not for some other groups. So just take a moment to think about some activities in the past with the theme of one world. On the webinar it says peace, but that's obviously from the last one. One world and also nature and environment that you have done with your group in the past, and what worked well and what maybe didn't work so well. And if you wish to share, you can either say it out loud or you can type it into the chat. Can you think of any grant that you've done on the nature environment one world sort of aim and principle?
Yeah, this is the aim and principle probably I'm closest to, really, because I actually work for the Environment Agency as well, so it's my actual day job to do with this kind of thing anyway. So I've done sessions on, about a year ago I did a really good session on pollution in the oceans.
Okay, nice.
About sort of that kind of stuff. We showed them some pictures of poor old turtles getting strangled and all that kind of stuff as well. We talked about microbeads and lots of things like that. And the actual session we went on to, because this was an elfin group, we went on to make some marine mobiles around with paper plates, jellyfish and fishes and things like that. That was a really good session.
For sure, I can imagine that was a good way to engage them in the aim and principle, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was really good. I did a session last week about insects, actually, just about the variety of insects and bees and pollination and all that kind of thing as well. So most of the sessions I've done have tended to be on sort of the environment and nature, really.
Sounds like it's your topic of expertise, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can give you an example of some other ones that maybe you have not heard of before as well. So in front of us now is the outcomes matrix, and for those of you that haven't seen the outcomes matrix before, across the top are the aims and principles of Woodcraft Folk, and down the sides are the age groups within the organisation. The bits that are coloured in the middle show which opportunities we can offer our young people in accordance to each aim and principle. So I've cut out the sections that we'll be using this evening for the One World Nature and Environment section. And we should be offering opportunities for our young people too, and that's the beginning of the sentence. And then so for wood chips, we should be offering the opportunity to show care for nature and appreciate and learn about their local environment. For elfins, we should be offering them the opportunity to understand how to take care of the environment, both locally and globally, and explore and experience the natural environment through practical activities. Then the pioneers can be understanding the effects of pollution and climate change and understand impact of personal choices and consumer behaviour. Then with the venturers, finally, they should be offered the opportunity to take action on climate change and environmental issues and consider links between international development and climate change. So now I'm going to go through each age group and give a few examples of some activities with the theme of one world and nature and environment, most of which will relate back to what the matrix is aiming for. And along the way, I can stop for any questions, or if you have any to answer any questions. If you do have any questions before I stop, then just pop them in the chat and we can answer them as soon as possible. So with the wood chips, it's important as they're young to remind them not to pick anything along a walk or a trip to the park or a trip outside that's still living. For example, flowers that are still living, leaves that are still on trees, and sticks that are still attached to trees. It's great to create things with natural materials, but we do not want to destroy any nature to make our craft. We should make craft out of nature materials that are no longer living and no longer attached to trees or in the ground. To help give wood chips the opportunity to learn about their local environment could be an idea to take your group to a local park or a range of local parks and open spaces over the course of the term. Even just giving them a chance to see what different trees there are in the parks. You can talk with your wood chips about how some parks have lots of trees and forests, and some parks are open lands, more like just a field. You can see what different leaves and flowers the wood chips can see along your walk and trip to the park, and also if any animals live in the park, for example, birds, sometimes deer, foxes, rabbits. Obviously, it depends what time of day and what time of year you're going out. It's great to do this in the summer term where the evenings are warm and light, but also exciting for small people to be out in the dark and see what the park is like when there aren't many people there, because I'm sure they'll have been to the park when there's lots of people there, but it's a whole different experience when you're going in the night time. If you get everyone very quiet and it's an evening, you might see all sorts of animals that you wouldn't see during the daytime. A good activity for helping wood chips learn to take care of nature and living things is to plant an egg box garden or something similar. To make the egg box garden, you will need vegetable or flower seeds, soil, egg boxes and water. You just use one side of the egg box and fill 3/4 of each egg slot with soil, and then add the seed. Place it in direct sunlight and water every day, and your wood chips will have grown their own plants and vegetables, a bit like the picture on the PowerPoint. So now we move on to the elephants. And they would like to be offered the opportunity to understand how to take care of the environment, both locally and globally, and also explore and experience the natural environment through practical activities. The Elephant Activity Handbook, which can be found online or from Folk Supply, suggests on page 24 to play nature bingo with your elephants. This activity will need to take place outside in a local park or the woods or the outdoor area where you meet if you have one. You can adapt the activity to suit whichever area you have access to. You get the elephants into groups and hand out the bingo cards, which you have filled with different natural sights they may see in the area they are in. Some suggestions include a pigeon, a tree trunk, bluebells, crocuses, roses, spider's web, oak leaf, and so on. As I say, you can put whatever you want and whatever you know the elephants will find along your walk. One second. So you can remind them again not to pick anything that is living and then send them on their way to fill out their cards. Make sure each group is accompanied by an adult, but let the elephants take the lead and tick off each item once they've seen it along the way. Follow up with a discussion with the elephants of what was hard and what was easy to find. Did everyone feel part of the group? Why was it important not to pick anything that is living? And did any group see anything that shouldn't be there in the park, like litter or other things that people have thrown away? So you could it's good to talk to the elephants about what they can do to help take care of the environment as well, both locally and globally. So the activity that I mentioned before in the nature bingo is about finding items in the park. And just to go back to that, another activity that's similar to this is to stand in the middle of the park and say to them, go and find me a yellow leaf, go and find me a green leaf, find me a stick longer than your finger, those sorts of things. And this gives them a chance to actually go out and explore the park and explore a bit more under the trees and those kinds of places to find the thing that you're asking them to bring back. So as I said, it's always a good idea to talk to the Elfins about what they can do to help take care of the environment both locally and globally. The Ecologist badge for Elfins includes activities that will help them learn what they can do to help, such as helping to separate the recycling at home, holding a litter pick in your local area, such as in the park that you've been to, or in the area surrounding the place your group meets. In the badge, it also suggests making wild seed balls. You do this by mixing soil, water, and wild seeds and sort of squishing it into a ball. And then you go for a walk in some woodlands and throw your seed balls into an area that looks a bit rough and as if they might need a bit of colour when the summertime comes. Another activity that I found in the Elfin activity book on page 15 is called Pizza Miles. In this activity, the Elfins are given a pizza base. They can bring whatever ingredients they choose from home or choose the week before, and the leader can source this if we're using a group budget. Make sure all the food comes in a packet, and using a world map or an atlas, work out whose topping has come from furthest away. For example, if they bought cheese, is it cheese that was produced in the UK or was it produced further away? Same with vegetables and meat that they may want to go on top. This is a good activity because you can talk to the Elfins about how their food might have got to the UK. If it's cheese that's come from Italy, how do they think that it might have come over on a plane or on a lorry? And you can sort of explain to them the journey that their cheese will have taken to end up on their pizza. And you can work out how far everybody's food is traveling, and then explain to them that sometimes this can have an effect on the environment when we're having food from far away. However yum it might be, it does have an effect. Do you have any questions, Grant, before I move on to the pioneers?
Yeah, the Pizza Miles one, that sounds like a really good idea. And we did the seed balls one last summer because our group has a stall at local Peace in the Park, and they gave us a park to do seed ball bombing in, so that went down really well as well. So yeah,
I like the pizza one because I think that when you're making something like a pizza, you don't think about those things, and definitely I think the Elfins, it's easy to sort of talk to them in the sense of a pizza rather than making things too complicated. A pizza can be quite easy to relate to and those sorts of things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So moving on to the pioneers, they also have a badge that fits into the One World aim, which is called the Conservationist badge. And it's all about an introduction to climate change and what young people can do to prevent it. There's a great game to play with the pioneers included in this badge. You split the pioneers into two teams. One team will be rays of sunshine and the other team will be greenhouse gases. The rays of sunshine must start at one end of the space, which will be the sun. The other end of the space will be labelled the earth. Start with a couple of greenhouse gases in the middle and explain that the rays of sunshine must go from the sun and touch the earth, which is the other wall, and then go back again to complete their trip. So their trip doesn't end until they're back at the sun. The greenhouse gases in the middle cannot move off the spot that they've chosen to stand in, and if the rays of sunshine are touched by the greenhouse gases, who can just move their arms around but can't move their feet off the spot, they must go back to Earth again and try again to get back to the sun. As the game goes on, you can slowly add more and more greenhouse gases and allow the pioneers to choose their position in the middle of the space. Remind them they cannot move off the spot and they can only use their arms to tag the sun rays. As the number of greenhouse gases rises, the sun rays will find it harder and harder to make it back to the sun again after touching Earth. After the game, discuss with the young people what happened. Hopefully they will have noticed that some of the sunshine was getting trapped on Earth and just going back and forth between the greenhouse gases and Earth. This increased as the number of greenhouse gases also increased. The heat is finding it harder to get back up to the sun, and therefore it's getting trapped on Earth and causing our climate to change. I think this is a really great way to simply explain what climate change is and how greenhouse gases are affecting the Earth to young pioneers. Another activity that is in the badge allows the pioneers to consider ways they can prevent climate change in the future. The badge suggests getting involved with an existing climate change campaign, or writing to your local MP and asking them to take action, or asking the pioneers' schools to reduce their carbon footprint by using energy-saving light bulbs. The pioneers could spend a session writing letters to their MP and also to their schools, or making posters for school and the centre or hall that you meet in about saving energy, remembering to turn off the lights when nobody's there, and that sort of thing. In the activities book for pioneers, section 7 is completely dedicated to nature and the environment. An activity on page 80 is called My Ecological Footprint. You need to be in a space where if necessary, the pioneers could take 70 small steps forward. Outside or in a large hall is probably the best. Explain that in the activity, the pioneers will be able to visibly see how much their lifestyle impacts on our ecosystem. For each question, the pioneer needs to decide which answer they should give and which is relevant to their life. This is in no way an activity to make the pioneers feel guilty, but to show them in which areas improvements might be possible or might not be possible. Everyone stands on an equal starting line. They all have a copy of the questionnaire that you can see, quite small, but it's on the PowerPoint there. Everyone stands on an equal starting line with a copy of the questionnaire, so they can see the questions as you read them out and see how many steps are available for each answer. They should also mark their answer on the questionnaire so we can talk about it afterwards. After reading all the questions and the pioneers moving forward, come back together as a group. Let the pioneers add up their results. Let the pioneers add up their results. The discussion afterwards can include questions like, how did it feel to always move or to be the one that was left behind? Which things would you be ready to give up or to change? This activity gets the pioneers thinking about their lifestyle choices, and you can also ask them questions like, how did it feel to always how do you feel your behaviour could change and why? Is it a life choice or is it a necessity to reduce your carbon footprint? The pioneers could follow this up by making an action plan of how to reduce energy use in the space you meet. For example, turning off the lights in the summer term when natural light can do the job, as some evenings stay light till quite late. So that activity of moving forward, taking the steps forward, really gets to see how some of the pioneers might do lots of things that have 5 or 6 steps, and some people might do more things that only have 1 or 2 steps, like cycling everywhere, whereas some people might drive everywhere, which, as I say, some things can't be improved and it's not up to the pioneer, but some things can be changed. So finally, the venturers. The venturers should be offered the opportunity to take action on climate change or environmental issues and consider links between international development and climate change. As we said, with other activities, all groups will approach this topic differently. If you feel your venturers don't know much about climate change, then you could try some of the pioneer activities to give them more of a basic understanding before moving on to the more in-depth activities. In the IFM resource pack, All Together Against Climate Change, there are many activities for all ages. On page 27, there is an activity for teenagers called How Bad Are Bananas? In this activity, venturers can discuss the impact of different actions on their carbon footprint. There's a list of activities, which again you can see quite small on the PowerPoint. There's a list of activities, and alongside there are estimated amounts of carbon dioxide that these activities produce into the atmosphere. Now, these figures were from 2010, so an updated list may be available elsewhere, but this is the one that's in the pack. Some examples in the list include boiling 1 litre of water, which is 70 grams of CO2 emission, with an electric kettle, and bigger activities such as a flight from London to Hong Kong, which they're averaging at 4.6 tonnes of CO2 emissions. And then they say that the first class ticket and flight would be even more emissions released. So you give the venturers all an activity without the number of CO2 emissions on, and get them to line up in order of how much impact they think their activity will have on the environment. Allow them to debate amongst themselves where each person should stand in the line. They should think about which activities they have nothing to do with and are controlled by the government or another authority, and put these activities in a separate line. When they have decided, reveal the amounts that each activity produces and see if they were correct. Afterwards, ask questions such as, why did you put them in this order? Were there any disagreements? Was anything very easy to place? And what was difficult to decide on and why? Make it clear that it is always very difficult to put activities in an order because a complete measurement of all greenhouse gas emissions of an activity is almost impossible. However, there are many estimates made by researchers, and it is better to have a rough measurement than not to think about the carbon footprint of these things at all. Ask the venturers on which end of the line are the activities that can be carried out at individual level. Should we start reducing our own carbon footprint through individual actions, or should we focus on influencing the political level and higher authority? There are also opportunities out there for venturers and older young people to be involved in campaigns that are already running against climate change. Greenpeace, for example, run a campaign called There Is No Planet B, which young people can be involved in campaigning with. There's also the WWF World Hour or other similar campaigns, and the venturers can encourage others in the group and other age groups in the district to get involved as well. Young people and venturers can look through the details of Greenpeace and the WWF campaign and do what they can to support it, or make their own campaign in their local area or school or to others in the community to become aware of the ways we can change our carbon footprint for the better. So that is venturers. Are there any questions before we move on to the last little bit? No?
Yeah, no, there's some really good ideas there, thank you. The greenhouse gas thing was really good as well. The greenhouse gas game, that was a really, really good idea as well.
I think it's a good way to explain to somebody that's never heard of that sort of concept before. And obviously I've heard of that concept before, but I even thought that's a great way of explaining it when I first read about that game as well. Cool.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
oh, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No.
Okay, so now when we're going to camps, we can also do things to explore the aim of working together as one world. And we can do this by getting to and from camp in a sustainable manner, sort of car shares if that's possible, or also where possible, travelling by train or coach or other public transport that is going to be going anyway to that destination. We can make sure that all waste from camps gets disposed of or recycled. And make sure that you do a litter pick at the end of the camp, or if it's been a summer camp, throughout the camp you can have litter picks to ensure that we're not leaving litter for animals to eat or to be hurt from. Venturers and DS may enjoy leading activities on the environment that they have engaged in the past and pass these games, challenges and activities on to younger children who are attending the camp. So just a couple of things to consider before we finish is that it's important to give practical examples of climate change consequences and possible solutions of how we can reduce the effects of climate change in the future. If you draw a too negative image, many people are put off immediately and think they cannot do anything anyway, so what's the point? If you say it's very simple to reduce carbon emissions, many people quickly forget about it and also don't do anything and leave it to other people. We can't force people to change their ways. We can only advise them on what would be best for our Earth's environment. So thanks for listening, Grant. And if you have any more questions or comments, you can ask them now.
Yeah, and another good activity we did was we visited our local energy from waste centre, you know, sort of what would have been called an incinerator in the old days. And that was like really eye-opening for the group to see all the bin lorries emptying the stuff out and all the stuff that got thrown away.
That's a great idea. Actually see where your waste goes.
Yeah, and it was run by Veolia, and obviously they want to be quite working with the local community now as well. So they really welcomed that visit as well. That was a really good one.
That's great. No, that sounds really good. And I hope other groups have those sorts. I'm sure other groups have those sorts of places in their area that they can go and visit as well. Okay, great. So the next webinar is going to be on the 22nd of March at 7:30 as always, and the next one is going to be on the aim and principle of inclusion and how we can be including everybody in our groups, and also how we can be talking to our young people about inclusion this principle. So book to join us as usual on the website, and I will send out the links that I've mentioned in the webinar in due course. Thanks so much, Grant. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks very much.
Take care.